Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. Let's dive in. I want to share with you my table of contents with you guys, just to give you a preview of what is coming in my book. If you are a newer listener, this might be your first time hearing this, but I am writing a book that includes my favorite exercises and symptom management tips and strategies to help improve not only your physical life with MS, like your walking and your balance, but also your empowerment and your confidence. There's not only exercises and strategies to improve symptoms, but there's a lot of education and research-backed strategies that can help you understand why certain things are happening. And I'm a firm believer that if you understand the why, it gives you the control back. So I wanted to share my table of contents with you guys. The title of the book is called The Missing Link, the essential guide to improve walking, strength, and balance for people with multiple sclerosis. As I just mentioned, it's actually a whole lot more than that, but that's how I boiled it down to understanding exactly what you will get from this book. So the first chapter is called Multiple Sclerosis 101, Diagnosis, Types of MS, and Causes. And this was one of the most challenging chapters for me to write because what I love talking about for multiple sclerosis is the things that you can actually do. Like, what things can you do today to make an improvement in your symptoms? And this chapter is not that at all. It's more of just the education behind what is MS? What are the different types of MS? How is MS diagnosed? And so it's very important information for sure. I also include things like the causes and general treatment options, but it was the most challenging one for me to write because I just wanted to dive into the good stuff. But that is the first chapter, especially if there are people reading this book who are maybe new to MS, or maybe they know someone with MS, but they don't live with it personally. So this can be a great introduction chapter to orient you to MS and what you're about to learn. Chapter 2 is managing your symptoms with these surprising strategies. And in this chapter, I talk about primary versus secondary symptoms. Every symptom of multiple sclerosis can either be primary or secondary or both. And it's really important to understand if it's primary or secondary because they are treated differently. And so in this chapter, I give strategies for primary reasons for certain symptoms and secondary symptoms, including fatigue, drop foot, heat intolerance, sensory changes, spasticity, bowel and bladder function, and cognitive changes. For example, if you have difficulty multitasking, like walking and talking at the same time, there's actually exercises and strategies that you can implement. Chapter 3 was one of my favorite chapters, and I hope that it's one of your favorites. It is called Neuroplasticity, How and Why You Can Gain Strength Even with a Progressive Disease. I think one reason this was my favorite chapter to write is because this chapter for me is what provides the most hope. If you truly understand what neuroplasticity is, then you should have all the hope in the world, even with a progressive disease like MS. You should have all the hope in the world that it is possible for you to improve your strength, your balance, your walking, your energy, your fatigue, your day-to-day functions. And so in this chapter, I talk about exactly what neuroplasticity is, and I explain it in a way that makes sense. In this entire book, I really try to stay away from any type of medical terminology that you might have to Google or look up. I want you to feel like you and I are just chatting in person and you understand everything that I'm saying. So I talk about what neuroplasticity is and how it works, but not only that. That alone should give you some empowerment and confidence and excitement to move forward. But I also give you strategies that you can implement in your day-to-day exercise routine that can actually promote neuroplasticity, meaning it's more likely that you'll see those neuroplastic changes even faster. Chapter 4 is called Move Your Body, 10 Exercises to Improve Your Overall Strength and Conditioning. This chapter is important because so often my clients think that strength training is all there is, that if they could just get stronger, they would walk better, or if they could just get stronger, their balance would be better. If they could just get stronger, your tripping would be better, your foot drop would be better. And while some of that is true, there's over 10 different types of exercises. And the way that I want you to think about it is each exercise type is in its own bubble. So improving one of those exercise types doesn't necessarily mean that another exercise type will improve. They're completely different types of exercise, and therefore there's different strategies to improve them. To give you an example, strength training is in its own bubble. It's completely different from stretching. And strength and stretching are completely different from balance. Another one that's completely different is endurance training or stamina training. If you have goals of being able to walk longer or do something for a longer period of time, that's more endurance. That training is completely different from strength training and balance and stretching. Other types of exercises are speed training. If you want to be able to do something faster, walk faster, move faster, you train speed differently. Similarly, aerobic exercise is completely different. So there's over 10 different types of exercises, and sometimes there is a little bit of overlap. So one exercise may actually work on strengthening and balance training or strengthening and endurance. But most of the time, they're different strategies, different exercises. So it's important that you know what these are so that you can implement the ones that are most similar to your goals into your exercise routine. So not only do I state exactly what these different types of exercises are, but I also give strategies and examples of exercises for each type. And there's also a lot of photos in this book. I had professional photos taken for most chapters, not all chapters, because not every chapter is about exercise, but any chapter where I do mention exercise, there are photos so that if you are a visual learner, you can actually see exactly what I'm talking about. Chapter 5 is called The Right Way to Exercise with MS. And if you are an avid listener of my podcast, if you are a MSing Link member, if you are a one-on-one client, this is hopefully going to be a great review for you. So this is the chapter where I talk about the difference between functional exercise and regular exercise. Because as you hopefully know, when you have MS, you need to be incorporating functional exercise. But in this chapter, I talk about the difference, what is regular exercise and traditional exercise, and what is functional exercise, which is better for MS specific goals. Why is functional exercise important and necessary for people with MS? What's the hype about? And I also discuss how to start doing functional exercises and how to break down movements. So just a quick glimpse into this chapter, functional exercise means picking a goal that you have that you want to improve on and breaking that goal down into as many movements as possible. Those movements are now your exercises that you do each day. So I help you break down what those movements might be based on your goal. The examples that I give in the book are walking, stair climbing, getting up from the floor, getting up and down from the floor, and standing up from any surface, but especially low surfaces. So there's text, written description of what those steps are and what those exercises should be, and there's photographs as well. Chapter 6 is called Modify Your Exercise to Work for You. So this chapter is meant to take all of the information that you've learned so far, but allow you to learn the adaptations and the different ways to modify an exercise. There are so many ways to modify an exercise, and it's so important because if you don't know how to modify an exercise and it feels too challenging for you, you might just not exercise because you feel like you can't do it that day. But if there's a way that you can modify your routine, then you're more likely to do it even on the days that you don't feel up for it, and that's going to lead to more consistency and better results over time. We also talk about rest in this chapter because while modifications are important, Rest is important too. And it's important to understand which one you should do. Are you having a day where you should rest? Or are you having a day where you should modify? And if you choose to modify, there's about 7 different ways that you can modify. So you can choose the one that feels best for you that day. Chapter 7 is called Measuring Your Progress at Home. The reason I decided to include this chapter is because a lot of my one-on-one clients and my MSing Link members are motivated by numbers, by results, by tracking. And so it can be important to see your progress along the way. This can be a great way for you to know, am I improving? Am I following the right path? Am I doing the right exercises? And there are lots of ways that you can track at home, but there are 2 different types of tracking. One is called subjective tracking or subjective outcome measures. And this type of tracking is more so via a questionnaire. So you are rating yourself, you're rating your fatigue levels with certain activities, you're rating your walking in different situations. So you are rating yourself. Whereas the second type of tracking is called objective or objective outcome measures. So this is more so where you're timing yourself or you're looking at the distance that you're walking or that you're moving. There are about 1,000, if not more, different outcome measures, different tests that you can do either in the clinic or at home. However, the ones that I talk about in my book are research proven to be the best for MS, to be an indicator of if you are actually improving if you have MS. And some of these tests are often done in the physical therapy clinic or at your neurologist's office, but there are ways that you can adapt them or modify them to do them at home. An example is a timed 25-foot walk test. This is a test that almost every client that I work with who has MS will do with their neurologist or with their in-person physical therapist. But if you're only seeing your neurologist once a year or twice a year, you might want to know sooner than that if you are improving, maintaining, or regressing. So there's a way that you can modify it to do it at home so that you can stay more consistent with your tracking. In this chapter, I review exactly what that looks like and how to do it. Chapter 8 is called Relapse or Pseudo-Relapse. That is the question. In this chapter, I discuss what a pseudo-relapse is and what a relapse is. They are 2 different things, and it's important to know what they are because they're treated differently. And in this chapter, I give you a guide. I give you specific questions that you can ask yourself to help you determine, is this a true relapse, a true flare, a true exacerbation, or is it a pseudo-relapse, a pseudo-flare, a pseudo-exacerbation? A true relapse is something where there is a change in your MRI. There is a new lesion. Whereas a pseudo-relapse means there is no new progression of the disease. An old flare might be triggered by something, a trigger that's happening. And it could be stress, it could be an infection, it could be a bunch of things. So in this chapter, I review in more detail what a relapse is and a pseudo-relapse, questions so that you can figure out exactly which one might be happening and what to do if either of those are occurring for you. Chapter 9 is called Mobility Aids, Good or Evil. And in this chapter, I review my favorite mobility aids for MS, and I also give you indicators of when you should maybe start to think about using one. And if that is the case, which one should you start using first? I also talk about how to use a mobility aid in a way that you won't become dependent on it. There are actual strategies that you can utilize so that when you use a cane, it would mean that you don't always have to use a cane. Maybe sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. Or if you're using a rollator, sometimes you use that, but there are other times where you use a cane or trekking poles. So I teach you what those strategies are. And we also talk about the importance of potentially having multiple mobility aids based on the type of day that you're having. Chapter 10 is called Your Biggest Enemy is Yourself. This is the final chapter of the book, and I really wanted to discuss mindset because if you believe that these exercises will not be helpful, if you believe that your MS has progressed to a point where there is no return, there is no recovery, there is no possible way for improvement, then the chances of you not improving are extremely high. So in this book, you learn the strategies behind neuroplasticity and functional exercise. You learn everything you need to know to exercise correctly to actually help you reach your goals. But if your mindset isn't in the right place, if you don't actually believe that it's possible, then you're not going to stay consistent long enough to actually see any sort of improvement, even if you're doing the right exercises. So we talked about the importance of mindset and how to get in the right mindset around exercise, as well as goal setting. All of these things are instrumental in seeing success with your exercise routine and instilling hope that your symptoms can actually improve. I know that for some people that might sound too good to be true, and if you need any reminders of what might be possible, head over to the playlist section and find the playlist called Progress is Possible. In there, I have about 5 different interviews with MSing Link members where they share where they were prior to doing this type of work, these types of exercises, and where they are now. And so if you need that reminder, definitely check that out. So as I mentioned, chapter 10 is the final chapter, but there is an FAQ section at the end. And the reason I wanted an FAQ section is because there were questions that I could just hear some of my clients asking me as I was writing this book, but it didn't necessarily fit into the chapter. So I made an FAQ section with the top 10 questions that I am asked. And it includes questions like, I can't exercise for 30 minutes. Is it still worth exercising if it's not 30 minutes? Or I plop down, I fall backwards when I sit down or attempt to stand up. What do I do for that? Another question that I answer is, one of my legs is weaker than the other. Should I just strengthen my weak side instead of both sides? Or I use my arms to lift my leg to get into a car, a bed, a bathtub, etc. How do I fix this? Another one is, I struggle standing up from the floor. How can I do this safely? And for that question in particular, I actually have tons of photos where I demonstrate my 2 favorite techniques. And that's a wrap on the MSing Link book. I am so excited. I just recently submitted my first official draft of the book, and I should be getting that back at some point soon. I will keep you posted on the official release date and the launch date. At this time, I'm thinking that it's going to be launched in the very beginning of June, but I will keep you posted. And I actually received an email earlier this week from someone saying, hey, Dr. Gretchen, I listened to your podcast called Foot Drop 101. Are those exercises going to be in your book? And I responded to her saying, yes, absolutely. Foot drop, drop foot, that is one of the most common symptoms that my clients have, and therefore it is a heavy focus in the book. But if you are someone who prefers videos, like actually seeing the exercise, not just in photo format or in text format, these exercises and everything that I mention in my book is also in my online MS wellness program, also called the MSing Link. So if you are a visual learner and you like to see videos and examples and demonstrations, my online program, the MSing Link, is probably going to be the best bet for you. And this book is meant to supplement that. I also share a lot of client testimonials throughout the book because I think that hearing from people that might be in a similar position to you can be so encouraging and empowering and motivating. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope you are as excited as I am for my book to launch. The next step in this process is hiring a book formatter and a book designer to help design the cover page or the cover of my book. So I'm really excited to try to find someone for that, but I will keep you guys posted. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm excited for you to read the book once it's launched.